We got in the shower. He didn't say a word. He just looked at me, like he was asking without asking. And I didn't stop him. I closed the door. No plan. No excuse. Just breath. Skin. Silence. I let him touch the part of me I buried years ago. It wasn't loud. It wasn't fast. It was desperate. And it was mine. Before we begin, I want to warn you that this story contains mature themes. It deals with desire, isolation, emotional boundaries, and forbidden choices. If these topics make you uncomfortable, you might want to stop watching now. But if you stay, I promise you, I won't lie. Not once. Johan and I have been married 5 years. We met when I was his secretary. I was 29. He was already unhappy with his wife. Or so he said. I didn't ask too many questions. I think I liked the power I had back then. Quiet power. People assume affairs are loud, dramatic. Ours wasn't. It was neat. Scheduled. We both smiled when no one was looking. By the time his divorce went through, I had already moved into his life. His world. His name. His home. Now I live in a house that could be in a magazine. Marble floors. Cold lighting. The kind of silence that never feels still, just hollow. I spend my days maintaining an image. Clean countertops. Fresh flowers. Dinner that no one talks through. Johan still touches me sometimes, but it feels like he's checking a box. We sleep in the same bed, but I sleep alone. He doesn't ask how I am. Doesn't ask what I want. I don't think he knows how. He speaks to the boardroom. I'm just furniture. I don't remember when I stopped trying to be interesting. Maybe it was the 3rd anniversary. Or the night he told me I should read something light because I was getting too serious. That's who he is. A man who calls silence peace. A man who thinks I'm lucky. And maybe I am. But it doesn't feel like it. Jameson moved back into the house last fall. Just for a while, he said. He needed space. Johan offered the guest room. No discussion. Just a text sent without asking me. I didn't protest. I didn't see a reason to. He was quiet. Always had been. He kept to himself. Stayed out of trouble. Not the type to push or demand. He greeted me like he wasn't sure if I wanted him to. Always polite. Always soft-spoken. But there was something underneath. A stillness. Not shy, just careful. I noticed it first in the hallway. I was wearing a dress Johan hated. Said it was too much fabric. Jameson didn't say anything. But his eyes stayed on me for a second too long. Not disrespectful. Not bold. Just long enough for me to feel it. He looked away fast. Like he regretted it. Like he hoped I hadn't seen. But I did. And I remember thinking, it's been a long time since someone looked at me like that. I started watching him back. Not in a way I planned. Just small things. The way he stood when he poured coffee. How he always waited for me to speak first. How he read books slowly and underlined phrases. He had quiet hands. Like he was used to not being allowed to touch anything too long. I told myself I was just being observant. That I was lonely. That I missed conversation. But deep down, I knew better. It wasn't what he did. It was how he didn't flinch around me. How he saw me, not as someone's wife. Not as background. Just me. I started to care how I looked again. Not for Johan. Not even for Jameson. For the woman I missed. The one who used to look in mirrors and like what she saw. The days started to feel heavier. Like something was waiting. I remember standing by the kitchen sink one night, hearing him laugh in the other room, low, warm, real, and I realized how long it had been since I laughed like that. Johan was still working late. Always working late. And when he came home, he'd give me the same half-kiss on the cheek. Like I was a duty, not a choice. And Jameson would nod from across the room, eyes down, lips pressed. Quiet again. As if nothing had passed between us. As if we were strangers. But we weren't. Not anymore. It was early. Maybe just past 7. I had a headache from the night before, one of those dull ones that creeps behind your eyes and stays there. Johan had already left for the gym. The house was still. I didn't think to knock. I never had to. The bathroom door was almost shut, but not fully. I pushed it open without thinking. And there he was. Jameson. Sitting on the toilet lid. His hand was moving. His eyes widened when he saw me. But he didn't move. Neither did I. Time slowed in the strangest way. I should have turned around. I should have said something. But instead, I stared. Not in horror. In hunger. And he saw it. He didn't speak right away. He just looked at me, unsure, but not afraid. Then he asked, "Do you like it?" It hit me like a wave I didn't see coming. The question wasn't crude. It wasn't even cocky. It was quiet. Nervous. Brave. "Do you like it?" My breath caught in my chest. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just stood there. My mouth wanted to form words, but all I could do was stare. He started to lower his hand, probably thinking he'd crossed a line. Maybe he had. Maybe we both had. And then I did something I never imagined myself doing. I reached behind me and locked the door. My fingers moved before my mind caught up. Everything else disappeared. The air, the floor, the ceiling, all gone. It was just him. And me. And a silence that had waited too long. I stepped forward slowly. My hands trembled. My legs did too. I got down to my knees. Not to pray. Not to serve. But to feel something. To stop being invisible. He didn't say a word. He just watched me. And I whispered, more to myself than to him. I wasn't his mother. But I was something I couldn't define. And he was temptation in human form. It didn't feel real. It felt like watching someone else. Like I had stepped outside my body and left the rules behind. Everything I had held together, the marriage, the image, the silence. It cracked right there on that cold tile floor. I wasn't thinking about what it meant. I wasn't thinking about right or wrong. I just wanted to be wanted. I needed someone to reach for me, not out of obligation, but out of need. And Jameson, he didn't hesitate. For the first time in years, I felt seen. Not admired. Not praised. Just seen. We didn't speak afterward. We didn't even look at each other for long. When I stood, I avoided the mirror. I couldn't face what I'd just done. I left the bathroom first. I didn't run. I didn't pause. I walked out like I had somewhere to be, though I didn't. And when I heard the door unlock behind me a few seconds later, I knew something had changed. Not in a storybook way. Not in a firework way. Quietly. Permanently. That morning lives inside me now. It plays in slow motion. Every breath, every movement, every choice. I've gone back to that moment 100 times. Not to relive it. To ask myself, why didn't I walk away? I didn't sleep that night. I laid next to Johan, watching the shadows crawl across the ceiling. His back was turned, his breath steady. He didn't notice how still I was. He never asked if I was okay. The house was quiet, but my mind wasn't. I kept seeing Jameson. The way he looked at me. Not just in that moment, but in the months before. The subtle stillness. The unspoken tension. I kept asking myself, was this always there? Or did I just start paying attention too late? At breakfast, I avoided looking at him. But I felt him before I saw him. He walked in slowly, nodded, poured coffee, sat. Normal. Casual. But it wasn't casual. Not anymore. He wore a plain t-shirt. Same as always. But everything about him felt different. Closer. I caught myself staring at his hands. Noticing the small scar on his knuckle. Wondering what he was thinking. Was he replaying it, too? Did he regret it? Did he want more? Did I? I stirred my tea longer than I needed to. Johan didn't say much, buried in his phone, reading something about the markets. I could feel Jameson's presence like heat in the room. Not loud. Not threatening. Just there. That day, I cleaned the same kitchen counter 3 times. I folded towels that were already folded. I looked at myself in the mirror, trying to find the version of me that made him stare. And I couldn't decide if I felt powerful or pathetic. I tried to shake it off. I tried to focus on normal things. I went for a walk. Made dinner. Scrolled my phone. But every time I stopped moving, it came back. The moment. The question. His voice. Do you like it? And the answer I never gave. The worst part wasn't the guilt. I expected that. It was the ache. The kind that buries itself in your skin. Not sharp. Just heavy. I wasn't supposed to feel this way. I knew that. I kept reminding myself. I rehearsed the reasons. He's too young. He's my husband's son. This is wrong. But my body didn't care about reasons. I took longer showers. Not because I needed to. But because the water gave me a place to pretend. I'd close my eyes, and he'd be there. Not in front of me. Not touching me. Just looking. Quiet. And when I touched myself, I pictured that first look. That silence. That lock clicking behind me. And every time it ended, I hated myself. Not because it felt good. But because it reminded me how empty I'd become. I tried to imagine how I'd explain this to someone. To Louis. To Kelsey. To Ellis, if she ever found out. But there's no language for this. Not the kind that lets you leave with dignity. You can't say, I was lonely. You can't say, I needed to feel real. People don't accept that from women like me. They want neat stories. Regret with clear borders. But nothing about this was clean. I started dressing different. Not obviously. Just small things. Softer lipstick. A little perfume when I wasn't leaving the house. I told myself it was for me. And maybe that's half true. But the other half? It was for whoever still saw me. And in that house, it wasn't Johan. It was Jameson. I started noticing when he was in the room. How close he stood. How he sat across from me at dinner. Never too close. Never too bold. But present. Every move I made felt like a test. Every breath carried weight. And I stopped pretending I didn't like it. I'd sit at the edge of the bed and ask myself, how did I get here? And the truth kept circling back. I was tired of being invisible. Of being touched without tenderness. Of being spoken to like a duty. Of eating dinner across from a man who knew more about profit margins than he did about the woman he married. I spent years making myself small. And in one look, Jameson made me feel big again. He gave me something my husband hadn't in years, attention without resentment. No sighs. No eye rolls. No complaints about timing. Just presence. It terrified me. And I wanted more. It was 4 days before either of us said anything. 4 days of stolen glances. 4 days of silence that felt heavier than shouting. 4 days of pretending nothing happened, even though everything had. I kept waiting for him to knock on my door. He didn't. I kept waiting for myself to forget. I didn't. Johan was out late again, something with clients. I didn't ask. I was grateful for the space. It was almost midnight when I walked into the kitchen. I wasn't expecting to see anyone. But Jameson was already there. Standing by the sink. Drinking water straight from the glass, like he used to when he was a teenager. We locked eyes. And for the first time since the bathroom, neither of us looked away. He set the glass down. Carefully. Then he said it. Quiet. Almost afraid. I'm sorry. I could hear how much weight those 2 words carried. But before he could say more, I shook my head. You didn't do anything wrong, I said. You were just real. He froze. I could see his throat tighten. Like he wanted to say something but wasn't sure if he was allowed to. We stood like that for a moment. The air between us too full, too sharp. Then he stepped closer. Not too close. Just enough. I never meant for it to happen like that, he said. But I've always noticed you. My chest hurt when he said it. Not from shame. From something else. Something softer. I smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind that comes with a deep ache. Not many people notice me anymore, I said. He looked confused. How could they not? I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it felt like something I hadn't heard in years. You'd be surprised, I said. Your father doesn't ask about my day. Doesn't ask what I'm reading. Or what I'm feeling. I could disappear and he wouldn't notice until dinner wasn't on the table. Jameson's face changed. It wasn't pity. It wasn't anger. Just sadness. A kind that feels older than he is. I always thought you were untouchable, he said. But I saw you. Even when I was younger. I saw you. I turned away then. Opened the fridge. Pretended to look for something. Anything. I didn't want him to see how much those words cracked something open inside me. When I finally turned back, my voice was shaking. I don't expect forgiveness. Not from you. Not from anyone. But I can't pretend it didn't matter. He stepped closer. Very slowly. Then, he reached for my hand. Not with hunger. Not with want. With reverence. Like I was something sacred. His fingers brushed mine. I didn't pull away. I let the moment sit. Let it breathe. And then I said what I'd been afraid to say since the beginning. This can never be real. He didn't flinch. But I'm not ready to let go, I added. Not yet. He nodded. Just once. No plans were made. No lines drawn. We stood in that kitchen for a long time, hands barely touching. It wasn't love. It wasn't lust. It was something else. Something careful. Something dangerous. Something alive. And I wasn't sure if I was strong enough to stop it. After that night in the kitchen, everything changed, quietly. We didn't talk about what we were doing. We didn't label it. We just drifted toward each other. Slowly. Naturally. Mornings started to feel different. He'd pass me the coffee, and our fingers would touch. Just for a second. I started leaving the creamer he liked on the counter without asking. Small things. Nothing anyone else would notice. But we did. We started reading in the same room. No conversation. Just pages turning. Comfortable silence. One night, I caught him watching me over his book. He didn't look away. Neither did I. We didn't need words. Some nights we ended up in the living room at the same time, Late. Too late to be casual. The house asleep. The walls thin. I'd sit on the couch. He'd sit close, but not touching. Just near enough. We'd speak softly. Nothing dramatic. We'd talk about books. Memories. Things we missed. He told me about his mother, the way she used to hum while folding laundry. The way Johann never forgave her for being tired. I told him about my 20s. The dreams I gave up without realizing. The years I lost trying to prove I was worth staying for. There were pauses in those talks. Long ones. Comfortable ones. And sometimes, charged ones. It was the quiet that made it dangerous. We never made plans. We never hinted at more. But something was always waiting beneath the surface. And then it happened. It was late again. Johann had flown out for a 2-day conference. I was finishing a glass of wine in the kitchen. I went upstairs to shower. The hallway was dark. I didn't hear him coming. I stepped into the bathroom. The same one. And he was there. Already standing inside. I froze. He didn't say anything. Neither did I. He just looked at me. Softly. Like he was asking without speaking. I didn't ask him to leave. I closed the door. And this time, there were no questions. No hesitation. No guilt in the moment, just breath, skin, silence. It wasn't rushed. It was gentle. Desperate. Wrong. Beautiful. I gave him everything, not just my body, but the part of me I buried years ago. The part that used to hope. The part that wanted to be touched with intention. The part that used to laugh without checking if it was too loud. He held me like I mattered. Every touch said I see you. And for the first time in years, I let myself be seen. We didn't speak after. There was nothing to say. We showered in silence. He washed my back like it meant something. We got into bed, my bed. The sheets still smelled like Johann's cologne. I wanted to change them. I didn't. Jameson lay beside me, not reaching, just present. He looked young. Peaceful. I watched him fall asleep. And I whispered words I wasn't proud of. This never happened. Then softer. And I'll never forget it. I stayed awake long after his breathing slowed. And I knew what I had done. Not just the act. Not just the betrayal. I had opened a door I couldn't close again. Not because I wanted more. But because now I knew what it felt like to be wanted for nothing but who I am. And I didn't know if I could go back. The silence came back. But it wasn't the same as before. This time, it carried weight. Edges. A kind of awareness that didn't exist before. We didn't speak about that night. We didn't even look each other in the eye. Jameson kept to himself. Left earlier in the mornings. Ate meals in his room. He didn't avoid me out of anger. It felt more like restraint. Like he was trying to protect both of us from whatever might come next. And I let him. Johann didn't notice. He never does. He came home from his trip like nothing had shifted. Kissed me on the cheek. Talked about flight delays and quarterly numbers. Then fell asleep with the TV on. The next morning, he left without saying goodbye. That's who we are now. I didn't lose my marriage. That's what people don't understand. It's not gone. It's still here. But I lost something else. I lost the last part of myself that believed I was good. Not good at pretending. Not good at surviving. But good. I still function. I still clean. I still fold Johann's clothes and water the plants. I still smile when people stop by. But I've gone quiet on the inside. Not empty. Just quieter. I catch myself watching Jameson sometimes, from a distance. Once, I saw him in the driveway, talking with Ruben and Louie. Laughing. Full, open laughter. The kind that doesn't ask permission. And I felt it again, the longing. The shame. The ache. Because that smile used to be for me. Even if it never should have been. Some nights I lie awake thinking about leaving. Just packing a small bag. Driving somewhere cold. Renting a room with a window and breathing air that doesn't feel borrowed. But I won't leave. I never do. Because where would I go? Who would I be without this house, this name, this shell of a life? Sometimes I hear Jameson in the hallway. His footsteps. The soft click of his door closing. We haven't spoken since that night. But I think he remembers it the same way I do. Not with pride. Not with regret. With silence. He was never mine. And I was never his. We met in a moment no one was supposed to see. But I remember it every time I lock a door behind me. And I always will. And if you're still here, if you're still listening, like this video so I know it meant something. Subscribe if you want more stories told the way they actually feel. And leave me a comment, even if it's just a word. Tell me what this stirred in you. Or tell me nothing. I'll be here either way.